Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm John Dickerson in Chicago on the third day of the Democratic National Convention. For the past 2 days, delegates have stayed up well into the evening to hear from the party's last two successful presidential candidates, outgoing President Joe Biden and his former boss, President Barack Obama. Tonight, they will finally hear the first extended remarks from the current ticket. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will introduce himself to Democratic voters as he formally accepts the party's nomination for president. Walz, the high school social studies teacher and football coach turned congressman turned governor of a reliably Democratic state, will speak to the largest audience of his career. Also speaking tonight, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and the 42nd President Bill Clinton, who 32 years ago was introduced to delegates as their nominee as the Man from Hope, the name of his Arkansas hometown. Hope also made a comeback last night in the remarks of former President Obama and his wife, Michelle.
We're feeling it here in this arena, but it's spreading all across this country we love. It's the contagious power of hope.
I am feeling hopeful because this convention has always been pretty good to kids with funny names who believe in a country where anything is possible.
And CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins me now to talk about the night of Tim Walz. What are we expecting from the Minnesota governor?
So we already know the governor's resume, which on paper is extraordinary. He has an amazing story, but he has to bring that to life and talk about his experience as a member of the National Guard, as a teacher, as a football coach, as a congressman, and talk about how that perspective could translate into helping Americans, and that's what he wants to do. He's going to draw on his roots growing up in Nebraska on a farm and talk about those values, which we've heard snippets of already, right? But I expect he will go deeper and talk about it more personally to try to allow people in on his life experience. And he will have a lot of help. There's going to be 14 old football players that he coached on stage with him. One of them will be introducing him. And so they'll be able to talk about how he changed their lives, made it better, and how they argue he could do it for everybody. So I think it's going to be a big night for the governor, who we already know is quite jolly and happy and go lucky. But is that enough to make a difference? We'll see.
Jolly is a beautifully deployed word because he does have a sort of old St. Nick kind of jolliness to him. You were in Milwaukee. We talked to you yesterday in Milwaukee. What was that like? And how much is Walz a part of that, or is it all love for the nominee, Vice President Harris?
So it was extraordinary because the arena was packed with 18,000 people. And I've been to several rallies now with both Walz and Harris. And yesterday, he actually came out by himself before we laid eyes on the vice president. And the crowd was, roaring. They were very welcoming, embracing of him because, again, he doesn't have any problems when it comes to likability. We just have a new CBS News poll that came out an hour ago that shows among registered Democrats, 60% are enthusiastic about Walz compared to 51% of Republicans for J.D. Vance. So the question is whether that enthusiasm is going to make a difference when it comes to looking at the ticket. As you very well know, the vice presidential pick doesn't make that much of an impact on election day, but it could do harm. And right now, they're trying to prevent any kind of harm to really get supporters to buy into Walz to like him even more.
Right. It reflects back on the person at the top of the ticket and the message they're trying to sell, which is what we'll try and figure out of tonight's events. Final question, Weijia, your normal job is to cover the White House president, who should be the nominee. What role is Biden going to have in this campaign, if any?
Well, I think he already played the ultimate role, John, which was to step aside and allow the vice president to rise to the top of the ticket. But it is not lost on the party that all of the delegates that will fill this room, that have been filling this room, voted for Joe Biden. And so to that extent, he will continue to rally for her. He will participate in campaign events for her to try to relay the message that she will now take on my agenda, my legacy, and that she is his surrogate now. And so that support is still incredibly important for Democrats who were excited about him and might not have been there yet for her. So we do expect that he will continue to play a role. But, after he appeared on night one here, he left. And that was an intentional move. He's on vacation now in Southern California, just taking it all in because, of course, he has a lot to process still. Even though he passed on the figurative torch, this was not easy for him. And so I think after his time off, he will hit the campaign trail for Harris.
White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Thanks a lot, Weijia.
Sure.